dark shadow has encompassed the earth because those of faith have hidden their faith. I want all of you to remember something. Do you remember the days when you hid your faith? Do you remember when you were young in the faith, but you hid your faith? And what I mean by that is you did not speak up. Internally, you knew things were wrong, but you didn't speak up. You just followed the flow. You kept silent about so many things because it was almost like the overwhelmingness of the environment you were in would not permit you to speak. And you just held it in, but you perceived too many things that were wrong, that were immoral, and you just didn't say anything about it. With a pure heart, you saw something that had such contrast. And we didn't speak. Because we did not speak, the immorality grew. This darkness grew. It's all over the earth right now. Every single day of my life I can see. It's like seeing the heart of man being eaten alive. And they're trading everything for gain in the world. They're doing everything to gain something in the world. They don't care if they're selling out heaven for gain right here on this earth. Think about prayer. Prayer has become routine for a lot of believers. And what I mean by that is if you ask somebody to pray, it's almost like they automatically, without thinking anything, they launch out a standard prayer. And then they forget what they prayed about. Prayer has become routine, meaning there's no great meaning in the prayer. But the point is, God grows us. He may call you for something, but you're still going to grow. God warned all of us, you can still be lost. There's a threat to have your name blotted out of the book of life. But see, that will only come to those who no longer love the Lord. To love the Lord is not just simply to think good of Him. You can think good of someone and end up killing that same person. We're not talking about that. We're talking about someone who obeys the Lord. If you love the Lord, then obey Him and let that love be complete, because your love is incomplete unless you obey Him. God's definition of love is different than ours, different from what the world has taught us. God's love includes obedience. I believe in the Lord's will. See, the Lord has a good will. Do you guys know that? When somebody says to you, the Lord's will be done, don't get angry, because God's will for you is that you prosper as your soul prospers. He wants you to make it all the way. God's perfect and good will is the best intention and will anybody could ever receive. Nobody can speak a better blessing on you than God's will that already exists. So if somebody says God's will be done, you better believe it's a beautiful one. God has a beautiful will for all of us. But somehow all of this is distorted. A long time ago, people would live their lives with a thought in their heads that they're going to have to give an account for everything they did. That anything built up here on the earth, if it's not translated to the heavens, it is a vain deed. And so normally, the labors they did in the earth were humanitarian based one to another. But now it's all different because they don't care about the eternal heavens. They don't care about God coming. They care about their own castle that they have. All their thoughts, everything is about them without regard to the living God. That's our society. It is without regard to the living God. In today's society, there's no thought of the living God in the things that people are doing. There's only a thought of themselves. How about the child nation spoken of in the Bible, the King James Version of the Bible? We know who the child nation is. Who's the youngest nation on the planet? The USA is. We're the youngest nation. We're the nation that did not exist among those of the old. Who does everybody follow right now? They follow our standard. That's what they follow. They follow our standard. Here's a big one. Marriage was made to free people from the bonds of lust. Marriage was something people looked forward to free them from the bonds of lust. See, nobody wanted to commit an act of adultery because it weighed so heavily and it was an abomination to the living God, so nobody wanted to do that. Now, you may not understand that because of the times you live in, but it was always said that people would become afraid of marriage because they would not be able, it would restrict them from fulfilling their lusts. In other words, people would not like commitment, and marriage people would turn away because they would feel like it's bondage to them, which means they're practicing whoredoms. That would become normal in society, and people would look upon one another committing lewd acts and say nothing, and it would be acceptable in society like it is right now. All these things were promised to happen in the generation right before everything fell apart. And don't we live in these days? Look at the kids. You can always tell a future by the children. We are occupying a day that the prophets warned about, talked about, prayed about, and could scarcely believe themselves. And we're right here right now, and things are escalating. There are over 400 prophecies describing the last generation, and we fit them all. There was another one that people would swear an oath by God. God said, don't swear by the heavens. To swear by heaven is to do this, is to use how people view you religiously and then use that as power over them. That happens all the time. That means morality is soon to die completely. See, when the Antichrist comes, he's not going to have resistance too much. We can see this by reading in Revelation. You can see by flatteries. He overcame everybody. That would be impossible in the days of old. You couldn't overcome anybody by flatteries because they had discernment. So if you can win somebody over by flatteries, they have no discernment. And if they have no discernment, it means they have no sight, no spiritual sight. And if they have no spiritual sight, then their eyes are on prosperity or on themselves. They're not on the living God. See, that's why in the Bible it says that God's people, if you're written in the book of life, you're not going to fall for that stuff. Why? If you're written in the book of life, you don't care how much somebody promises you. You're not going to move from the foundation of Christ, but everybody else will. They're going to find themselves in a crunch, and they're going to say, let me get out of this crunch by doing this thing over here. They're going to ignore the living God. How many of you ever got in a position where you actually had to close your Bibles, shove God out of the way so that you could do something that you're not supposed to do to get yourself out of trouble? How many had a mind that thought that way? This is a spirit in your flesh, by the way. So everybody probably went through that process. You fought with yourself. You had to shut your own Bible. You had to purposely ignore the word. You wanted the word far away from you so you wouldn't feel the conviction of doing what you did. But now people just do it. They don't have to close the Bible. They don't have to argue with themselves. They just do it. What was once a struggle for us to do. See, you know what that's called? When you have to struggle to sin, there's a righteous seed within you. And I'm telling you, people don't have to struggle anymore because the righteous seed is not there. Listen to me. That lets you know there's a righteous seed within you. When you have to have a long conversation with yourself, justifying what you're doing, that's wrong. And you're talking to yourself and planning everything. Well, I have to do it because if I don't do it, I'm going to be in trouble and I have to. And you wrestle, there's a righteous seed within you. That's a clear marker. There's a righteous seed within you fighting against the spirit of flesh. But if a generation is born and they don't have that argument and they have no conviction, then you already know what type of generation that is. That's the apostate generation. The apostate generation has no values. They don't see anything wrong with this or that. They have no morality. Marriage is not in their minds for the right reasons. And they will do everything to protect themselves. In fact, they carry the traits of everything God said don't do. They carry the traits. And they are the generation that will worship the Antichrist. That is to say, they will accept the Antichrist. They will accept what he says. How do I know this? Because people, even in the church, something else has taken place right underneath your noses. Something that's so devastating that it's crushing the faith of many. Something undeniable. It cuts to the heart. We're at the threshold of the end. And once we cross that threshold, that's a real, true darkness. But I can tell you this already. I've taken these trials and tribulations in my life, and I've heard the Lord. Your trials and tribulations are speaking to you. The Lord is saying what you will do, given the time that will come. And I'll tell you something, if you respond in righteousness now, you may be withheld from going through the grunt of the same test then. All those who are praying that they're worthy to escape all the prophetic things that will come, that means you have to be ready to go at this moment. It is no good saying if the beast comes, then I will do this and that. Nope, you've got to do it now. Have you taken the shadow of the mark now? I tell you, many have. They say they won't take the mark of the beast, but I'm telling you now, they have already taken the shadow of the mark. Right now, they've taken it. So you have a lot of people saying, I'm not going to take the mark. But let me tell you something. When the situation came and it was heavy, you stopped. You withdrew. You were no good for anybody. And you were focused on that issue and how to get it solved, and everything went through your mind. How in the world can anything like that have power over you? I'm telling you, it does have power over you. It's no different than the mark. The only difference is the mark is permanent. Your situation was temporary, but the mark is permanent. See, in your situation, you may have solved it by other means, but you knew somehow you could be forgiven, didn't you? The mark won't be that way, because once you take the mark, your loyalty will be with it, and there will be no coming back. That's a portion of the shadow of the mark. You've had the circumstances. Now it's time to put them together and soberly think about the mark. Don't run out there like Rambo. I'm not going to take the mark, because we've already failed to pass the trials God has sent us to wake us up concerning the mark. That's very real. Why do you think so many people fear the mark? I can tell you right now, I do not fear the mark. I fear the Lord. But I wasn't always like that. I thought about the mark one time and I said, wait a minute, I'm here. I'm going to be prone to everything everybody else is going to be prone to. Dealing with them, that's why I don't like emotions. I don't like emotions. In fact, I can identify everything in myself I do not like. I can do without, and emotions are one of them. I don't like emotions. We've been through countless situations, and a choice was presented to us. Either carry on in the gospel as a person, whatever the cause. But no, that's not what we did. If you look back on it, a minute situation stopped your entire life. It halted your entire life. And the mark will be 1,000 times more of a challenge. Yet we boast that we're ready. Oh, I'm not going to take the mark in the future. We say that, but we have failed in the trials we have at hand. That's not soberly thinking about the mark. Just about everybody in this world knows what hunger is. And I tell you, instead of going hungry, they give up their grandmothers. When it comes down to it, see, here's the bad part about hunger. When you're not hungry, you cannot identify with the desperate feelings you have. Only when you're hungry do you begin to contemplate and remember how bad it was the other time. But when you're not hungry, it's as though it was a dream that you were hungry. Anybody ever been sick and all of a sudden you had the flu or something, you were healed from the flu, but the next time, a few years later, you felt the flu coming on, and then you became a little jarred because you said, oh no, I gotta go back through this again, and you remembered the symptoms only. You remembered the flu last time and what you went through only because it was coming upon you again. But when it was not upon you, you forgot everything. You couldn't even recall how bad it was. Have you noticed something about your trials? Right now, if you're not in a financial trial, you're not thinking about finances. Not that way. You can even go back in your mind and remember the trial, and it's fractured. It's almost like a fractured memory, isn't it? You can't recall the emotions in it. You cannot recreate the feelings you had in it. You can attempt to describe it, but you cannot recreate the feelings. And because you cannot recreate the feelings, the gravity of your situation has been lost. It is just a fractured thought. But here's what happens. If you were to have that same trial again, when you start feeling bad inside, that's the only time you can remember that you felt bad like that before. It takes a situation to come to remind you of how bad it was the first time. Otherwise, it becomes fractured and you cannot recall how you felt. That would almost be like recalling the pain level or recreating the pain levels in your body of an experience that you went through. You can't do that either. On the one hand, I thank God that our memories are separated from the actual pain. But there were so many times I did want to remember. I'm not like most people. I don't want to forget the pain. Forgetting pain is foolish because it causes you to be drunk. That's not sobriety. Sobriety is to learn to live with reality, God's reality. Those things that have happened, not to forget about them, but to grow from them, to understand them. Because everything God had us in was needful for our growth. Unless you believe somehow He made a mistake, and I do not believe that. God said, I've given you power to tread upon scorpions and serpents, and nothing will by any means hurt you. He's giving you power over all the enemy, and nothing will by any means hurt you. How can we believe that and be afraid of all this stuff man can do? God said, don't be afraid of what man can do. Don't be afraid of man who can just kill the body, but be afraid of the Lord who can kill both the body and the soul. The shadow of the mark. Look what we have done for finances. And we all know what it is. What you do for finances is actually saving your own life, keeping yourself from starvation, because most people are afraid to starve. The other people who have not starved yet, they're afraid to look bad in front of other people. You don't believe me? If If your utilities go out, you're going to get nervous. You're going to say, oh, everybody has their utilities on but me. It feels like you have just been kicked out of the club, and people are not used to that. And I'm telling you, if they'll do anything to keep their lights on so they can look good in front of everybody else, they will take the mark. Imagine you being on the street. Everybody has electricity and water and everything else. They're throwing barbecues, but not you, because you don't take the mark. But everybody else is out there barbecuing. See, a lot of people have it in their heads, well, the mark is going to come when the world is cracked in half and this, that, and the other. Nope, it's going to be just like it is today. So somebody's going to be on their street in a house, not taking the mark, and their utilities are going to be cut. No food. They're going to sit there starving. Their neighbors are going to have stuff, but they won't. And they probably will say, I didn't think it would happen like this. The Bible tells us, and it warns us of the most terrible time that will ever be. Because of what, though? Because of deceits, deception. You know how people talk about the great deception? What is the greatest deception? I'll tell you what it is. You ready? It's to believe that man is correct in his interpretation of the Word of God. Do you know what people have been doing? They hear a subject, they don't really believe it. Then somebody gets on YouTube and they start pumping out the evidence. Now listen to me, they don't believe it at first because there's no confirmation inside. But somebody pumps out the evidence of false stuff. I've seen it. I just haven't said a word about it. People pump out the evidence of false stuff, and all of a sudden you have a bunch of people on YouTube swearing it's true when it is not. So easily how they believe a lie. Why? Because somebody can present evidence. And where do they get the evidence from? The internet. Something is very wrong. They're so quick to believe things by evidence that they're going to be followers of the Antichrist. See, it's by evidence people will follow the Antichrist because he will prove to people that he is a type of Messiah. They're going to believe him because of what he can do. You may say, I'm not going to follow the Antichrist. There are many Antichrist type people out there already. And people follow them, and nobody's calling them or saying to them they have an Antichrist spirit. Listen to me. You know what the Antichrist spirit is? The Antichrist spirit is against Christ. Christ was all about forgiveness. That should wake you up. Can't you see in your flesh? You follow a word of the powerful speech is what you do. You want to follow someone that's going to prove to you something. Where's the message of forgiveness? See, because you can't give two messages at once. You can't say forgive them and then sit up and say, well, they're guilty. You can't say that in one message. When's the last time you heard somebody outside of this place tell you to forgive everybody out there? That's not what you hear. What do you hear? You hear it's their fault. It's their fault this and it's their fault that. They did this and they did that. All you hear is an exercise on blame. You know what that's called? Murmuring and complaining. That's what that is. You don't hear about forgiveness. You don't hear about loving your enemy. What happened to it? Because that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. You either have people who are sticklers for how to behave yourself according to the Ten Commandments, but they don't talk about forgiveness either. Because I tell you, when you hear somebody preaching Jesus Christ, but they have taken off forgiveness, something is wrong. When you don't hear them speak the message of charity, something is wrong. Something is very wrong. And I tell you that Antichrist spirit is out already. In the Bible it says, you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, the apostle said. He said, many Antichrists have gone out already. That was back in his time. Love is 1,000 times more potent than anger could ever be. Love is very instructive. It is raw power. That feeling you get inside is just a piece of the residue love brings. It is by no means love itself. You don't interpret love unless you can interpret God. But these things that have invaded society, causing generations to work backward, to utilize dark things, has weakened the family unit, the Christian unit. And then you wonder why Christians run around and it seems like they have no power to make real change in this world. I tell you, you cannot utilize the methods of the world in a supernatural or holy situation. You can't do it. No more than you can utilize the weapons of Satan to fight Satan. You can't do that either. But through ministers being distracted, and this is why you have to pray for them. Never cease to pray for these ministers. They're under great scrutiny, and somebody has to intercede. Never be quick to condemn, but stand up in full faith and intercede. Don't agree with the adversary who would like to kill everybody. Stop agreeing with him. Stand up and make a difference because you're armored, full of power, with God's grace and mercy. But Satan would like to convince you won't make a difference. That's a lie. Men say one person cannot make a difference. That's not what your Father in heaven says. One can set 1,000 to flight. correct? That's a scripture. Two can set 10,000 aflight. The one still has power, but with two people, it is multiplied. Do you see that? So many people miss that statement. They'll say, well, two is better than one. Yes, but the one still has a lot of power. Don't you know that half the war you've been in right now is a materialistic war? Of all you can gain in this world, it is only materialism. Can't you see that? That's all it is. It's like a delusion that no one can escape from. It looks pleasant to the eye. You want it. You have this strange hope in it. Anybody ever go out and buy a brand new computer? But before you buy the brand new computer, you're thinking, wow, I can get this done and this done and that done and this done. And when you buy the brand new computer, it sits there. It offers nothing more than the other one did. You were excited and amped up about it. A couple weeks later, a couple months later, you find out it's just like the other one. It's not doing too much. But my question is, did you notice the excitement over materialistic things that is in us that we cannot deny? And we shouldn't deny, but begin to combat. What can make us get so excited over something brand new that will ultimately end up just like the first one? We go through these cycles over and over again. It's almost like every time we buy something, the same thing new, we have a different hope for it. This we have to identify and begin to combat within ourselves. That all things become tools. Then you won't become excited about getting anything and then adding your faith, your hopes, and everything else to it. See, people who do that, when you start to cherish these materialistic things, it's going to be very difficult for you to depart from them. And listen, mankind has made a bad mistake. Nothing that is made with man's hands should be valued above another human being. But that's not the case, is it? When he comes, every eye shall see him just like every eye sees lightning in a storm. You can't help but to see lightning. Even if you have your eyes shut, it's going to light up on you. You're going to know there was a flash. So then everybody will know when Jesus actually comes. It's not going to be one group here, one group there that knows and nobody else knows. Everybody will know. Because when Christ comes, he's coming not just to one reality, but to all. Even the dead will see him. So he's in all realities. He's in all dimensions, and he's coming here. Nobody's going to miss him. So don't believe it if somebody says, well, he's over here in secret chambers. No, because just that small group saw him. You see that? Everybody must see him at the same time, and everybody will know he has come. You won't have to tell anybody. It's not going to be a secret. It's not going to be covered up. It's not going to be hidden. Do you know what Israel believes right now? He's in secret chambers. Right now, this very day, that's what they're saying. That's what's spread around to a lot of people in Israel. I'm telling you, these times, oh my, they're right there. He says, wherefore, if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in secret chambers, believe it not. For his lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. He says, then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins. At this time, it's going to be like the 10 virgins. Everybody wakes up. 5 of them were wise, 5 foolish. They that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. They didn't take anything seriously. But the wise took their oil and their vessels with their lamps, and while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. All of them slumbered and slept. If he said it's likened to these 10 virgins, then all of them slumbered and slept. But before they slumbered and slept, some took oil and some did not. That is your life. Some took their life seriously. Some did not take the life seriously. Your life yields the oil. Your trials and your tribulations yield the oil. You cannot share your oil because your oil is based in your experiences. Your experiences have yielded a greater faith to you, a greater resolve in Christ. You can't sell that. You can't do it. And so listen, when they woke up, they trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said unto the wise, give us your oil, for our lamps are gone out. Their lamps are gone out. They don't have enough faith to believe anymore. Sounds just like today when people are trying to get on fire for the Lord and they cannot. Doesn't it sound like today? You're trying to find a reason to get interested back in the New Testament. Somebody's out there and they're not interested in the New Testament. Not like they were. You used to be on fire for the Word of God, and you began to listen to other types of information, and you went down the wrong highway and it snuffed out your flame. There's a fix for that. See, because before you went into this additional information, you were thankful to the Lord for what He got you out of, how He delivered you. You have simply forgotten how God delivered you. You must remember how God delivered you again. Take time to think about the many things in your life where God could have condemned you, but He didn't. And He got you out of things when you did not deserve it. Get praise back in your heart again by thankfulness. not hype, but to really thank him. Understand that right now, your situation should be 1,000 times worse than what it should be. Realize you don't deserve life, you deserve death, but he granted us life. That is soberly looking back into your past. All of us were children of wrath. Don't be like one of these New Age Christians who truly, honestly believe they deserve heaven. Don't be like that, but be real with yourselves. All of us know how much we lied, how much we ignored, how much we have stolen. All of us know our own backgrounds. Don't deny it, but be thankful you have been delivered from it. It doesn't matter if you just sinned 5 minutes ago. Be thankful you were not destroyed, and seek the Lord again. That will rekindle your flame. It is to remember how God delivered you. He told his own people when they left the desert, he said, if you forget how I delivered you out of Egypt, that's the day you're going back into bondage again. So if you can remember how God delivered you, your flame shoots up. You'll have a thankful heart again. But always remember what took you away from that thankfulness of the Lord. See, the world would have you believe that you deserve something. That is not what the Word of God says. These virgins said, give us of your oil. Our lamps are gone out. But the wise saying, not so, lest there be not enough for us and you. But go rather to them that sell it and buy yourselves. In other words, you just messed up. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. Those that are ready went with him. So that means those that are not ready are not going. Those that were ready went in with him, and the door was shut. The virgins did not shut the door. It was shut behind them. Only those who are ready will go with him. The Lord has made this clear. Those who are not ready will not go with him. They will be considered hypocrites. Afterward came also the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open up to us. But he answered and said, verily, I say unto you, I know you not. Let me tell you something. Those who forget about Christ, how can they know him? If you lift up things in this world higher than your Lord, and you forget about the Lord, how then did you know him in the first place? Because to know the Lord is to see him every day of your life. Now, I'm telling you, this is a time you have to fight to be sober. You have to really fight. Don't let your flame go out. Some of you, your flame did go out. Remember how he delivered you, and never take the path that took you away from Christ again. That was a warning. If you can come back to Christ, I mean be on fire for the Lord, that the gospel is no longer boring to you again, because you stuck your nose in doctrine that fought against Christ, and in your life it won. If something can take you away from the sincerity of Christ, you are in trouble. And I'll tell you something, if you follow something else other than Christ, he didn't know you in the first place. See, that's a tear, but you're not a tear. How can you be a tear and you desire Christ? Don't let Satan drag you down another day. Cease from these other doctrines quickly. You know what that means? That means one person to the right of you can read something and it not bother him. You can read it and it bothers you. For you, you've got to leave it alone. If it takes your faith and your time away from Christ, leave it alone. Don't weigh your Christianity against anybody else's, but you make sure you yourselves are ready for Christ's arrival in full. Don't worry about anybody else. When you go down researching things you think it's going to fulfill you, have you noticed it only has you searching and does not answer too much? Forever learning and never coming to the knowledge of the truth. That's a trap. I'll say it again. Some people can read additional things and it does not bother them. Some people cannot. Based on how God has made you and what you're able and not able to do, stay close to Christ. Let nothing compete with it. Don't fall into this trap of competitiveness that some shepherds have today. They like to compete with one another. They like to be the one who's first and to be the one who's right. Dare to be the one who's wrong and the one who's last, that you'll find life and not be a castaway. Don't fall for Lucifer's tricks, because who do you think is orchestrating all this stuff anyway? Mind you, the first beast, which a lot of people, they don't know about the first beast and the Antichrist. They talk about the first beast, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. That lets me know they don't know, because the second beast is the false prophet. He is one and the same. He has two horns like a lamb, but spake as a dragon. The Antichrist and the false prophet are one and the same, and the beast is the seat of the nations, the power base. The Antichrist is the man who will be appointed over the beast. That's why he makes the world worship the first beast, who is a collection of nations. But the Lord has told us that the world will not recognize any of these sayings. He even told us that the prophets would err in their interpretation. See, if you're compromised by flesh, you're going to get the end times wrong. And we just read about these virgins who were not ready to go when Christ came. Why were they not ready? Because they took no oil with them. They did not take it seriously. It was not critical in their lives. I don't know about you, but my salvation is critical. Jesus is critical. All this other stuff, I'm telling you now, it will get you off track and it will deaden your life. How many of you feel like you're just halfway alive? You're not fully alive yet. You can go ahead and confess that. I already know the answer to it. I know that many of you out there, you do not feel alive. You feel like you're being dragged through life, but you're not alive. You're searching and searching for something that's going to cause you to feel alive, and you cannot find it. The true question is, will you pay attention to the way that Jesus is giving? Not what some expert out there is giving, not what man gives, but what Jesus has already said. He has established the way. You don't have to go another day feeling like you're being dragged through it by life. You can be alive again, on fire again, energized again. Some of you miss that. Some of you have been crying for that, but you cannot do it your way. Because if it's anything you should know is that your way does not work. That is to say, the way of flesh, the way man can conceive of a way, is not going to work for you. If you belong to Christ, there's but one way that will work. All other ways are going to be vain because you belong to Christ. Do you really think He would have something else prevail in your life to grant you a fulfillment? No, He won't. That's why you're empty, because that's preserved for Him. It's not preserved for anybody else. Imposters have already come, and you thought you would be fulfilled by the additional knowledge you gained, only to find yourself right back at square one. I already know. Time for you to acknowledge. You don't have to confess it out loud. Just hear what I'm saying. Because if you belong to Christ, nothing else will fulfill you. That means you have to be spiritually fed because you're starving spiritually. And you try to replace spiritual food with vanities. And now you know the cost of that. What you feel now is you're dying of starvation spiritually. That's why you feel like you're barely alive, being dragged through life. That's why the mind sways back and forth, and knowledge fights the knowledge of faith. Some of you never needed proof. Now you do. That came from a different doctrine. Because the ones I'm talking to, the Lord filled you with confirmation from the beginning. You did not have to search. God put the truth in you. Everything they speak about in this time, God put in you already. When you went to verify it, that's where you messed up. Because when you went to go verify it, it was killing something in you. It was almost as if every time you verified something the Lord put in you about this additional stuff, it killed you piece by piece. See, you were excited at first. It's true. But then as you went into it, for each thing that was verified of the confirmation that was already in you, it started destroying something in you. You don't know what that is. You can't even go back to the subject matter that used to excite you in that other stuff to get excited again. Now you're dead to that. You're not on fire in the Word. I know exactly what happened to you, but the question is, will you continue to do it your way or man's way, or are you going to do it the Lord's way? You've got to tell the Lord, I trust what you have given me already. See, you were trying to verify something God gave you naturally. That's almost like Jesus telling you something and then you saying to Jesus, well, let me go see if what you said is true. How disrespectful is that? This is not a game. This is forever. This is for keeps. This is a one-time deal. And what will you do? Because man is messing up more and more every single day. But the Lord called you out of man's ways unto a holy path. What will you choose? You can no longer have one foot on one path and another foot on another. You've got to make some changes and a commitment. Don't be frightened of a commitment, but you have to decide. I can't do it for you. Nobody else can either. It has to be your decision. Folks, you're right at the door.